out your body.
Riding through the city in my Merkaba. Time ain't linear, circular. First they wanna hate, now they replicas.
The Tesla, a young Tesla.
Smoking something strong, call it nebula. Crossing shawty names off my hit list. The same ones say I never hit this.
How are you doing today? My name is Josefa, and what is about to follow is a conversation that I was very blessed to have and honored to have with Bernhard Guenther. So Bernhard is the author, creator, and facilitator of the website Piercing the Veil of Reality. Bernhard has been prolific in writing, in recording, and sharing a lot of content that's allowing individuals that are going through the awakening process to embody more of the shadow aspects and actually do a lot of the work that is associated with reaching these higher realms of existence, of your totality. Now, as somebody that myself is still going through the process of embodying all of this and embodying a lot more, healing a lot more, and actually working on my shadow a lot more, and somebody being honest as well, knowing that there's been a lot of spiritual bypassing that I've been involved with personally, obviously in my life, both in the past and to varying degrees now that I may or may not be aware of. But I'm very blessed to be able to have this conversation, to be able to share space with Bernhard. Bernhard was first introduced to me through one of my other mentors, Thomas Sokowitz, when I was shared a video about love bites, paranormal love bites, and how individuals that are more quote unquote spiritually awakened are experiencing very, very strange phenomena with some of their relationships with loved ones and family members, et cetera, and strangers coming into their life and really doing a lot of things that just on the surface level don't make sense. But when you tap into the other realms, the astral realms and energetic realms, you are able to find and see that there are other things that are at play that are affecting individuals while they go through their process of the awakening. Now, one of the main things that I've been able to pick up from Bernhard is a more discerning mind to the whole aspect of spirituality. Because for me personally, when I started my journey, or when I was reignited, I guess you could say, there was this still concept of everything being good. And, feeling like if I shouldn't judge anything. Like judgment is obviously its own conversation in its own way, in its own time, but still having the discernment to know what is not a good position to take or not a good path to follow, and what's more in tune with your own individual growth. Now, Bernhard released a webinar earlier in the year, The Hero's Journey. So it is The Hero's Journey and the Process of Embodiment. And in this conversation, in this webinar that he has put up, I will share with you the link if you want to purchase it yourself. Bernhard goes into great depth with the whole process of the hero's journey, what it's like to actually embody all the pain and suffering and all the other different things that one has to, from what I've been told and what I've experienced on varying degrees, in order to come into the totality of all. Because as we realize and as we say things like we want to become one, we want to have compassion and empathy, we do need to obviously experience the heights and the lows in order for us to fully actually be able to be compassionate and to be empathetic. And I'm very grateful for this conversation. I will now forward you through to the conversation that I am having with Bernhard. So thank you for checking this out. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe, both on my channel and Bernhard's as well, obviously. And I will share a lot more information for Bernhard in the description below. Thank you, and lots of love. Awesome. All right. So guys, I've already done an intro video that here I am with the man himself, Bernhard Guenther. Guenther, I want to make sure I say it correctly. And we've had a bit of a conversation pre-recording. So my first question to Bernhard is more of from his level of understanding, where are we right now in the whole cusp of things? We're going to be touching on a few topics here, ascension, traps in the ascension, and potentially some other things when it comes to some new age ideas about things. But in terms of where we are right now at the end of November, coming into December 2018, Bernhard, how are you feeling things are right now? What are some focuses in your own personal life that you're really trying to come down on?
Yeah, we're in quite interesting times. Ascension is quite the trigger word, especially from the New Age perspective, because I feel we're not going anywhere. It's more a transformation we're going through, and I call it the time of transition. And there's actually a term I picked up on from Moravia's work, Gnosis, based on ancient esoteric Christianity, the true Christian teachings before the church, distorted it and used it for social engineering and turned it into dogmatic religion. But he also talks, this time of transition, which spans not only hundreds of thousands of years, but it's exponentially coming to surface, so to speak, as the energies are increasing, right? And time of transition in the sense that we are also evolving, obviously, in the bigger picture of soul evolution of consciousness. But this process itself is not a very pleasant process, because it's not the awakening, like, to say generally, as the New Age claims, just this linear awakening of more bliss and love, and we're going to be in paradise and party with the aliens who are going to save us. But it's more, everything needs to be revealed. And if you study ancient esoteric teachings, a lot of prophecies, they hint at this age, which again, the New Age has also distorted with, for example, 2012. According to that whole prophecy, which was very oversimplified, we have awoken and ascended 6 years ago, or the end of the world and all that nonsense, right? But it's a deeper process. And I feel like, from a soul evolutionary perspective, I feel we have barely graduated kindergarten, right? And there won't be a collective awakening anytime soon. So, I shy away from talking about we and collective because, again, there's currently 8 billion people on this planet. There are vast different levels of soul evolution and being and whatnot, levels of awareness, soul lessons. So this process also affects everyone differently. But in the sense that this time of transition just brings up everything that needs to be looked at, everything that have been suppressed, avoided, has, all the lies need to come out to be rectified, as Moraviv talked about as well. And, in the gist of it, it's basically shadow work. The shadow needs to be confronted within and without, in our inner selves, our own inner world, what do we have avoided to look at within, and what we have avoided to look in the quote-unquote outside world, right? To get out, to leave the cave, right? Plato's cave, so to speak, so we do not get distracted by the shadows on the wall anymore. So it's an intense process, and it's also an archetypal battle of dark versus light, in the sense, right? That works through us, and we see it out in the world. But again, most often we mistake symptoms for causes, and this process is just it's almost like a battle, so to speak, what we're experiencing as well. But this battle has also its purpose, because it provides the friction for soul evolution to ignite the alchemical fire within, to transmute lead into gold, which is the true meaning from ego consciousness to soul, embodied state of being, right? And that's just really, again, that's a process for that's different for each of us. And yeah, so that's kind of like, in a nutshell, the times when. And also I wanted to point out, there's, energetically, there's this planet also being bombarded with this higher frequency, this divine force, right? But it doesn't work in ways what most people assume, that we automatically have this Kundalini awakening, enlightenment, but it literally shines a merciless light into anything that is not awake within us. So, this process, as I say, is like a spiral out and in and all around. It's the ascent and descent at the same time. And we can only ascend as high as we are willing to dive deep into the shadow world, into the underworld. As Sri Aurobindo said, one, can only reach heaven. You can only reach heaven if you have walked through hell. Or Carl Jung, the tree that reaches to heaven has its roots in hell. And that's just, it sounds a bit scary, but it is just the process of awakening, of becoming more aware, of raising consciousness. And that's the whole meaning of conscience, means to become more and more aware. And you cannot just choose sides, that you just want to just look at one thing and ignore the other. And that's the trap of the New Age, right? The over-focused on the positive and ignoring the dark side, or even denying that there's a dark side or evil and all of that, right? So all and everything needs to come to light.
Okay. Wow. Thank you for that. There was like that clip in itself. So many bombs that went off for me personally. I like that time of transition. That's definitely what you were saying. A lot of different videos I've watched have been in times of transition. hero's journey. So that's something that I have mentioned in my previous recording prior to this interview, but I did work and I did purchase the hero's journey and the process of embodying webinar that you did, which is very powerful, and still I will keep on going through that. Your own individual journey for yourself, I believe that you really focused on music as a younger man. And through that passion that you were ignited into more of the yogic sciences, I believe, and then obviously that has gone, and from there you've taken that, run with it, and you've established such a content and body of work that for those of us that are looking to seek, you are offering the perspective from both sides. And just with the last statement that you made, you definitely made it clear that you do have to go down and up. Everything happens simultaneously. So I just want to say also too, for those that don't know, Bernhard is living in California and was, personally experienced the fires that just recently happened. So, when you're talking about there's a lot of things going on, definitely you're experiencing it, not just in the subtle realm that's happening outside you.
Yeah.
I'd like to stay on the hero's journey topic first, but I do want to hear your thoughts on this. I was listening to a gentleman by the name of Cliff High, and in this video, he was sharing about that there was some form of radiation, a coronal activity that was happening from the sun that's only been documented, well, the most recent time was 5,000 years ago. And the Chinese at that time had made a transition from Confucianism to Confucianism, however you call it, from more of a Taoist sense. And if we look at our world right now, there's definitely a lot of changing in terms of the polarity and what we're looking towards in politics. But I guess to try and keep it on the topic of the hero's journey for the individual, because as you mentioned, there's 8 billion of us. We can't speak about we until we figure out the I, and that's the process that I'm on. How are you, well, I'm just trying to see where I can go with this. With your own process of embodying and coming through the layers of the darkness and the light, what are some of the most potent things that you found have really assisted yourself initially? Because you can kind of, I'll speak for myself, came in everything love, love, light, knowing that there was another element to me, but kind of judging myself for that, but then trying not to judge myself, which is the whole paradox that comes into your head. Now I'm realizing, okay, both are here. I do have my preferences, but I do judge, and I'm working on releasing that judgment. But what has been some of the more potent things for you coming through this? Because I'm lucky enough to be able to speak to you. You've gone through the process of reading all these books from these beautiful teachers in the past. Knowing what you know now, if you had to speak to yourself, although you have to go through your own journey, what tips would you share with yourself that really would have assisted you?
It's a good question. I mean, first of all, as I said, every path is what I also realized looking back, how this path is unique for me. So I had to really learn also, even my work I do, in my professional practice, working with others, that I do not project what works for me onto others, because I realized for myself, my process was so unique, in terms of my own soul purpose, soul talents, karma, whatever, anything that came up. And, there's a saying, you can only connect the dots looking back, right? And if you look back from this higher perspective, you see that there's an unseen thread, like almost some guidance, there's, throughout this whole hardship. But when you're in the midst of it, you don't know it, So if I would go back, even, I have been through really tough times. I mean, I was dealing with extreme despair, depression, shame, guilt, suicidal thoughts, all of that. There were many, many instances I would, literally thought about killing myself, taking myself out. But now looking back, these episodes in the hero's journey, in terms of the dark night of the soul, right, were profound initiations, actually, right? And without them, I wouldn't have actually embarked on the path. And I see what I realized is the paradox of suffering, which we all want to get away from. We don't want to suffer. I don't want to suffer. You don't want to suffer. We don't want the world to suffer. Suffering sucks. Right? But it's also this avoidance, like always constant pursuit of pleasure and joy and avoidance of pain, and it's natural, right? But suffering, I realize, has its purpose, And there was an interesting quote I came across from Sri Aurobindo from Integral Yoga, and the student asked him, what's the purpose of suffering? And he said, suffering is the only force that can awaken matter out of its inertia to become more conscious. So there's a paradox in a sense, because even when people ask me, how did you get on this path? Why are you doing the work you do? And I can summarize it in one word: suffering. That was my only driving force. It was not because this is a niche I could make some money with and talk about, all of that and have a business around. That was never a career choice in all of it. If anything, my life relates to the saying, tell God your plans and he will laugh at you. Because, as you mentioned, I came here to the US as a drummer musician and wanted to pursue that, but dealing with depression and all of that and not being able to fit in, it forced me to question the world. And my own suffering forced me to look into myself, to not get into more despair, shame, guilt, self-pity and all of that, but to ask the question, who am I? What's going on? And that question set off my path. And then I sensed the guidance. Then through synchronicities, the answers came, the help came, which also was finely tuned with my own process. So back then in my own, certain teachings came along. I found new talents, body work and all healing work I'm now engaged in. So all of that revealed itself, so to speak, right? So to answer your question in a nutshell, what I would tell myself going back, that whatever I would say hardship I've been in, like there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And there's a deeper purpose and meaning for every suffering, right? And it's about, most importantly, taking self-responsibility. To not fall into the blame or victim trap, which most of us do. I still do sometimes. It's naturally, when we're down, we like to, blame fuck the system, all of this, fuck our parents, everybody, and there's truth to it. We are being, that's fucked basically by the matrix, by the control system who's putting us down. But you see from this higher perspective, there's a free will choice behind it. There's a higher purpose. And that's understanding the role of evil, even that evil has its own free will to exist as an expression of the divine, the dark side, so to speak, in this duality to create this friction, again, to ignite that alchemical process. It's just how we respond to it. And there's guidance, there's beauty if we answer the call. Again, going back to the hero's journey, if you truly answer the call and set on the adventure, there will be guidance, there will be the mentors and unseen help most often come, like I said again, in, very mundane synchronicities, the right book at the right time, the right teaching, the right person. And the teacher is maybe not an official teacher, can be any person that relays information or can be a guide, whatnot, right? And, but, like I mentioned in this webinar as well, the hero's journey is like the archetypal spiritual journey for all of us in our unique way, but it's not just one road, it's cycles within cycles within cycles. So I still sometimes go maybe down into the darkness, into the dark night of the soul in a different way, right? I realized like that in the awakening process, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just becoming more aware. I'm still where I'm at, but I have a higher perspective of what's going on, what has been going on, right? So again, but going back to suffering, that's a paradox. Suffering initiates the search, the quest to answer the call, you know what I mean? But also through inspiration. I mean, I was also curious, obviously, about these topics, especially like the alien UFO topic. I was amazed why nobody else would question that, because obviously you cannot be alone, right? But then I also made the mistake, that was my naivety in the beginning. I have different phases. I fell into what I call the trap of the revolutionary mind, listening to Rage Against the Machine, going to protest, fuck the government, and project my own shit on everybody else, right? And then, I took the New Age pill for a little bit, engaged in wishful thinking, lack of discernment, and the oversimplification of reality creation. So all these were just lessons on the path along, right? And then, but the irony is, like, the more you then engage in this sincere self-work, which is the most important part, the esoteric self-work, the psychological self-work, and all of that, to really embody the divine force, to anchor it in the body, not to escape it, not to escape the matrix, but to transcend the matrix, to transform yourself, to be in this world and not of this world. That's the end stage of the hero's journey, right? Then we also transcend suffering, right? Then we're not going beyond duality. So that's a paradox in the equation. Without suffering, we don't wake up, but we also wake up in order to transcend suffering.
Wow. I'm going to try and summarize two quotes that you said that I think connect. Suffering is what causes matter to, causes inertia to matter, still matter. And then you said at the end, suffering can also be the catalyst to awaken in the matrix, to be in the matrix, but not of the matrix. Wow. And there's so much parallels I can, in my day and time right now where I'm at. I just started studying music. I've just started moving into these spaces of creativity, something I hadn't expressed as a child moving forward. And the whole element of being, quote unquote, a revolutionary, when I look at my own lineage, my second last name is literally pirate. There are levels of me that definitely does see the system. And as you mentioned, there's still parts of me, and will probably continue to be, will be, externalizing the distaste of what you see and how people are being treated, the inequality. But I would like to transition this to now moving into this element of the new age. And I would like to hear from your perspective, like a very simplification, however you want to express it, obviously, but to be able to relate to those that are on the quote unquote the spiritual path that may not have come across your work or other teachers that are expressing more of a total expression of consciousness or trying to embrace the total concept of it, the light and the dark. What I'm coming to see, especially for myself, because I had my reawakening or the quickening that happened a few years ago. And then the first thing I came into was the first group that embraced me was the New Age group. Because, you know, when you're trying to find spirituality, you don't resonate with anyone around, they're obviously the first people you can find, whether it's the books, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I knew that there was something there, but I didn't fully resonate. It wasn't until a book downloaded on my laptop that, again, I can't explain, but I'm very grateful for, that kind of awoken me to more of the paradigms that it was just like everything I thought I knew told me I was wrong, but then backed it up with logic. So it's like, okay. And then I could feel it. So for me, that was the truth at that point. But to those that I'm, you know, and for all of us, there's going to be many things I'm going to realize, hold on, I've been thinking about that in more of a mundane sense. New Age trap, is it something that I personally am externalizing to be more than what it is? Or is that something that you really feel is something that can be, that is a major hindrance in more of the mainstream spiritual conscious community? I don't know if you want to make any statements on that, but is that something that you're finding? And is that some things that you can maybe point out that are some distortions with, you know, very common concepts that we apply or we've learned from the New Age, that can kind of help move this along that trend of kind of, you know, maybe uncovering some things that we've all collectively come to agree upon, but needs further discernment?
You mean with regards to like the discernment within the New Age, basically?
Elements of it, yeah. So
Yeah.
you did mention about psychedelics and
Mhm.
drugs, and I don't want to say drugs, actually plants, but
Yeah.
knowing that there's two sides of it with what you know, that'd be something I'd like to go down that pathway. And that's probably a good example of one way that the New Age looks at certain things.
Right. I mean, the thing is, right away, it's a problem when it's about definition, because I don't want to also generalize when we say New Age. What is the New Age, right? Everybody has their different ideas. I've been called a New Ager because I provide body work and energy work, right? Hence, I'm supposedly a New Ager. For a lot of people, that's already New Age. So, you know, I don't want to, like, you know, for me, very simple, like what I call the New Age, in a sense, it's just it's very, you know, for me, the other side of a coin of dogmatic religion. It's also very dogmatic, and it's a religious belief system, right? And it's mostly based on like taking bits and pieces from all kinds of Eastern teachings for the most part, and then fringe, you know, especially the UFO alien topic. That's a topic on its own, and throw it together in a very pop spiritual way, right? That is most often a gross distortion of the true esoteric teachings. And hence, so the New Age, when I say the New Age, also, there's a lot of disinformation, but disinformation doesn't mean that it is all lies. So it's truth mixed with lies. And that's the tricky part. That's why people get into it, because they resonate with some truth, but then it's kind of distorted and very fluffed up and all of that, right? And oversimplified. So, you know, there's discernment needed to really separate truth from lies. And this discernment happens on two levels. That on one level, as you mentioned, yes, we need basic critical thinking to understand the mind and not just dismiss the mind and just, like sometimes New Age says, just follow your feelings, you know? No, feelings can be extremely manipulated as well and reactive. So it's not wise to just follow them. You know, if you tell a heroin addict just to do what he feels like doing, you know what he's going to do. So, and we all are addicts and can be addicted to many, many other things, especially in the New Age, or talking about plantness, and people get, I've seen myself in the past, addicted to the peak experience, the magic pill, and overestimate themselves, the state of being, and mistake all kinds of bliss states and emotional states for love or a higher state of consciousness, which are all traps. And when you read about esoteric teachings, they call them out as psychic phenomena, which need to be one must be very discerning about, right? So, and then on a nutshell, like when I say New Age, for example, when people point out, like I mentioned before, like avoiding the negative and just focusing, like forcefully focusing on the positive, that's already a big red flag. And I'm not saying, you know, that we should just, you know, focus on the negative. It's not about dwelling on it, right? And I'm all up for positivity and healthy optimism. It's obviously very necessary. You don't want to, like, you know, get stuck. Oops, sorry. Let me just
Hi.
Hey, sorry.
Oh, good. I'll pause this if you need to take that.
Can you just pause?
Thank you.
So it is about the discernment and, like, again, understanding critical thinking. I had to also learn the basics of the trivium of understanding logical fallacies, and the doing your research before you, grammar, logic, rhetoric, doing your grammar, meaning doing research before you come to conclusions and all of that, right? To really understand, to use the mind, not get stuck in the mind, but also even in esoteric teachings, you learn it's about developing the mind to think correctly, to analyze correctly, but also understanding its limitations, that we can get stuck in the mind, obviously, right? And we can become too head-centric, and logic in that sense had its limitations. And that relates to higher knowledge, gnosis, which goes beyond the mind and relates to embodiment, and that inner work, and that we can also only receive certain truths and insights that corresponds to our inner work, right? To work through our biases, wishful thinking, and to really resonate with truth. That's another trap in the New Age. A lot of people claim that they, resonate with certain teachings and claim that's the truth because it makes them feel good, which is not, just because something makes you feel good is not necessarily the truth. It could be just your wishful thinking. It could be that's very manipulative in that sense. Or the opposite end, like just because something sounds scary and evokes fear in you, and then people claim it's fear-based, fear-mongering, and but that doesn't mean that it's not true. So we need to clear out our emotional biases, our conditioning, our reactive behaviors, right? And because sometimes the truth can be very uncomfortable, right? The universe or God or divine doesn't care what we think, right? It doesn't divide between good or bad experience, just experience, and we just divide it like or dislike. So that's what I mean with the New Age. It's just a bit, oversimplifying and generalizing these deeper truths. And there's, even reality creation, there's truth to it from a deep esoteric perspective, but the trap in the New Age is the idea that we live in a solipsistic universe, that it's all, you just create everything, it's all you, right? And that's the trap. That is not true, because what you are, when you say I create my own reality or you create your own reality, what you are you talking about? What are you speaking? And it's most often the conditioned personality, first of all, right? And then with all its conditioned needs and desires, and then people claim that whatever we think of or emotionally align with, that's what we create, which there's actually some truth to it, but it's not the whole picture, because there are other forces that also work and other people's realities that all intermix. So we don't have fully free will and do not create all of our reality, right? So it's so oversimplified and distorted, which then can also easily fall into victim blaming, right? That's a big one in the New Age. If somebody gets sick or accident, well, this is you're attracted to you because of your own bad thoughts, and the shaming. When I actually, from an esoteric perspective, if you're truly on that awakening process and break through the matrix, you actually have a rough time, because forces will be set upon you to put you down, right? To interfere, and that's the new. When you look at from the New Age, they would claim that this is attracted to you, and you need to adjust yourself and watch your thoughts and emotions, when in fact, from an esoteric perspective, it's a sign that you are actually on the right track, right? Because there's something trying to keep you down. And most often, even from esoteric, again, quoting Gnosis, you can have the most fulfilling life in matrix terms, in indulging in your pleasure and become rich and have success, career, family, and all of that, but not have evolved one bit esoterically. And the matrix will not interfere, because you're not a threat to a system, because you play within the matrix rules, right? You're not trying to ascend really to a higher level, right? So these kind of things are very, that's what I mean with the New Age. But again, truth is mixed with lies. So I'm not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Even with psychedelics, you mentioned it. I had amazing experiences. Especially I used to work a lot with mushrooms in the 90s. And it helped me a lot in my own process. It brought out a lot of childhood wounding, and with my parents and stuff, I needed to confront. And especially I was so head-centric, it got me into my body. And in a sense, introduced me also to body work, energy work, yoga. I remember the first body work session I got, I was on 4 grams of mushrooms when I met my mentor in the desert, and he did body work on me, and it was the most profound experience. And I experienced viscerally and on a deep level that the body's made of energy, and my muscles store memory and emotions, right? So it was helpful, but it was also overwhelming. I've definitely abused it, right? Too much. And it was too much, came up too fast. And, then I got interested in shamanism and all of that and spent some time in Peru. But then I started to see the abuse, right? The distortion of shamanism, especially lately, it has become so hyped, right? With especially ayahuasca and DMT and all these things. So, and I see that more and more from an occult perspective, there's danger to it, because there are in these unseen realms, even as it's written in Sufism, these higher realms, these invisible realms are more dangerous than any physical jungle in the world. And we can easily be interfered with entities, beings, get entity attachment, and most often they appear in very tricky ways, appear most often as benevolent energies, right? Which we then get duped by. And I can see myself, and I'm very sincere of myself, and look back in some ayahuasca visions, DMT journeys, or mushroom journeys, I projected more into it than what actually happened, right? Because I wanted it to be so amazing so badly. And I got tricked as well and took on some entities back then because I simply didn't know what I was doing, right? Out of a context but again, it's not black and white. They can be helpful to a certain extent, but they're also tools, and first of all, they are not needed. And I want to emphasize that, because if you study any esoteric teaching, they don't talk about that, of using any of that. They actually warn of it. And I can understand the warning, and I've stopped doing any of that now because I used to work with it up until last year, because I hosted my own retreats in the jungle with my Peruvian friend, working with Wachuma. He's a San Pedro cactus. He's a Wachuma shaman. And it was great work, but we also felt a lot of people didn't have the foundation. They were just looking for that medicine without having engaged in any deeper, sincere psychotherapeutic work, psychological work, esoteric work, deeper meditation practice, embodiment practice. Everybody just wants to have that experience and the plant do the work for them. And that's not really how it works. I think they realize they're highlighting things, but the work is to be done on a sober level. But I realized in myself as I, working with them, that every time I do it myself, stuff wouldn't come up for me anymore, but I felt like it was started actually to interfere with my own embodiment process. It became counterproductive. I would give something away, right, by using an external substance agent. I realized I need to do this completely sober, and hence, quote unquote, activate DNA or embody the divine force through my sober inner work, and not use anything external to really anchor it and ground it, and not make it depend on anything out there. So that's where I'm at. So again, I'm not, everybody's where they're at. I'm not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I just feel there's too much emphasis on the positive aspects of medicine plants, including cannabis, and this very irresponsible claim there are no dangers whatsoever, right? There may be no dangers from when you see from a physical perspective, but there are dangers from an esoteric, energetic perspective and an occult perspective. Right. So that's the balance, basically.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I don't know if I pre-recorded this, but I definitely spoke with you about this before we started the recording. Something that reintroduced me to Bernhard's work was when I partook in my first ceremony with ayahuasca. And my experience is my own experience. I'm very grateful for it. But where I went wasn't, quote unquote, the light blissful places. I went very much in the opposite direction to see what I needed to see, to go where I needed to go, to then come out of that. Now, after that, I had started receiving a lot of Bernhard's videos on YouTube. A lot of things were popping up. And from my research, which, once I found you, I didn't really research much further, to be honest. You were one of the only people I could hear that was speaking on the negative aspects of, when I say negative, everything has its own place, but the elements of actually getting attachments, actually having people coming through or entities coming through and affecting the people on a physical plane. And you've spoken in one of your videos, a client of yours that, we said this beforehand, had to leave the country out of certain things that people didn't understand what was happening with him or her, for him to do certain work to come back. And I actually followed the same process that he used with the healing, the hologenetic dreamtime.
Holographic kinetics?
That's the one. Yes. That definitely assisted, but it was both that with the intellectualization of the logic of what you were speaking on. So, for me, this actually is something that's very prevalent in my life, but more so than that, the circles that I'm around, it's something that I'm actually hoping to really share with people, because there's a lot of emphasis on how many ceremonies have you done? What number are you at? And me, I've only had the one sitting, or the 4 sittings that we had within the one time. But even from that, I know that there's so much that I need to get myself into that alignment. If I do decide to go back again, I need to do that much more first, as opposed to me coming in, even though I thought that I knew what to expect. And then having the experience, it's like, there's thinking and there's having the experience. So I know you've already spoken on, layers of the truth mixed with lies, coming into the more total comprehension of seeing both aspects and elements of what's needed. And now you, in your own personal embodiment, realizing you don't personally may need to use these things, but if you have certain students that have done certain work, it is a tool that can be used to assist them in their own healing. I love the fact that you had your first bodywork session with one of your mentors while you're on 4 grams of psilocybin, because I can't even imagine what that felt like to have that release. Like,
I did many things back then I cannot imagine right now anymore.
That's part of the fun of the journey. We're here for a reason, right? Okay, awesome. So could we speak on that for a little bit? And again, I'm more than happy to share videos that you've already gone into depth with this. But just for those that may not be familiar with you yet through my small community and connecting them to your work, what are some things that, especially for those that have these blissful experiences? And then from what I've come to learn is, even though you may be experiencing bliss, there may be other entities that are actually giving you that experience, but maybe feeding on your soul force. Whether or not that, certain people have said that. But is there anything that you could share about your own experiences or what you've come to know with this, realizing that just even though you felt something positive, if you were not aware that this is a potential, that this could have been happening to you, not to say it is or isn't, but just to be aware of it?
Yeah. I mean, there's different aspects. I mean, as Lisa Renee talks about, I can highly recommend her work as well. I quote her in that article. And the article you mentioned, by the way, is called Plant Medicine Entrapment, right? Which is a website. And she also talks about, through ayahuasca's medicine plants, there can be so-called faux enlightened experiences installed, because these entities can easily manipulate emotions and energies, and even to this whatever plant. And I've experienced a lot. I mean, I have lost count how many times of mushrooms. I work with DMT a lot. I've probably, in the 90s and early 2000s, I've totally, probably smoked DMT at least 30 times, right? And really explored it and went deep. And, especially, I don't know if you have done DMT, but this is the ultimate blissful experience, right? It's like, oh my God, it's like the as I called it, the cosmic orgasm. It's fucking amazing, right? But it didn't change anything in me, right? And I never had like a bad trip, but it brought in some energy. Sometimes I felt, because I didn't have the context, that something felt off actually, but it didn't truly heal anything, in a long time. And I've even written an article. I've now even seen a good friend of mine, and she has done work extensively with ayahuasca for many years, but she also realized how she was lying to herself in the sense, and all these issues came back tenfold, even though she thought she had healed them, right, through just exposing to ayahuasca. So that can be very deceptive. And the problem is, like, we get just, especially on the basic, when you work with ayahuasca, it's a DMT rush. So naturally you get this like blissful experience at some point, even if you dive deep to the shadow, the typical and the purge and all of that, you come out the other side. That's the archetypal, hopefully the archetypal ayahuasca trip, so to speak. So people ride this bliss wave, but then, that's the same thing what ties into this very misconstrued topic of love, right? And what is love? And love is actually not necessarily an emotion or a feeling at all. And we mistake that, because when we love and in the romantic bliss, and we just, so we mistake that for love. But true love, this higher state of bliss and being is not an emotion actually. It's a higher state of consciousness, a higher state of being. And it's impossible to put into words, but it's very grounded and anchored, and it's anchored in knowledge. In the esoteric teachings, you read it, everything, and especially esoteric Christianity, they say love is light is knowledge, right? Which the New Age have also, we hear a lot about in the New Age, love and light, right? And light, things light, but light means knowledge, gnosis, right? Embodied knowing, you're living it. So love is really also knowledge, you're living it, you have anchored, you're grounded, right? You are, like even Sri Aurobindo talks about, you're not high all the time, up in bliss somewhere and like feeling beautiful, but you also not get dragged down. You're completely in 0 point, right? You're completely, which is also not a detached, which people then mistake, a detached, dissociated intellectual state where you're just like unmoved by anything. You really truly connect with everything, but because you feel you are also not, you're not subjected anymore to good or bad, right? You just you're not fluctuating anymore between good experiences, bad experiences, high and low, right? You're completely neutral in that sense. Again, that's, we're dealing with the limitations of language and words right now as well, right? And I'm not claiming, as I written in my work and talking about, I don't claim to be fully awake in the true meaning of the word, right? I still have my own work. I mean, I have my experiences and my own process, but I'm certainly not awake in the true meaning of the word, right? But I had enough experiences where I know when I have fooling myself of these faux enlightened experiences, especially initiated with medicine plants, psychedelics, or treat deeper experience of one is that through my meditation practice, inner work that just stabilized itself, right? And it's a very simple, a very calm energy. It's not this overwhelming, especially on the psychedelic, it's just, this overwhelming state which doesn't even make you function in everyday life, right? If you would be in that psychedelic state all the time. So it's a more very grounded, embodied, and that's when it truly anchors itself, without this outside agent, so to speak. So again, like I feel like sometimes psychedelics can show what is possible in a sense, right? It can bring up stuff, as I mentioned, but I'm so removed from it now. Like I don't, again, that was a phase in my life, and I wouldn't judge anybody for what they're doing. I just want to especially now, but times have changed as well. I have to say, Lisa already in her work, she talks about how the ayahuasca spirit got hijacked by these forces because everything has become so popular, and there's a lot of distortion and abuse in Peru. I mean, I've been 10 times in Peru, right, over the past 10 years. And the last time I was in the Sacred Valley was 2006 when I did ayahuasca there. That's 12 years ago. And I already saw the ayahuasca tourism there 12 years ago. And now it's gotten even worse. And I've been since then more in the jungle. And I see it, especially since it has become so popular and hyped. I mean, when I started doing it in the 90s, hardly anybody knew what is ayahuasca, what is DMT. And now you see it popping up everywhere. You have ceremonies in New York, LA. I mean, I'm being invited here all the time. Everybody's a shaman now. So there's a lot of abuse, pseudo shamans, and especially in Peru, a lot of, naturally, some of these so-called shamans take advantage of that because they want the dinero, right, the money. And I've noticed some people, I've worked with a shaman who actually, for example, mixed purposely datura into the ayahuasca brew on purpose, which is another plant, to increase what they say, the fireworks, the visuals, because they know the gringos like the visuals, the visions, right, to get them hooked on that. When also the traditional ayahuasca use, it was more about the purge, the purga, to really it was a very physical process and not really a visionary process, right? So all this have changed, and now, especially now engaging with 10, 12 people you have never met in your life, and all of a sudden sometimes 40, 50, 60 people in the ceremony. This is insane. You open yourself up. I've worked with this medicine woman in Peru, and she's seen literally an entity coming out of one person and jumping to the next person the shaman was not aware of. Things like that. Again, the traditional use was just for the local tribe, or mostly one-on-one, but not with these groups of people you have never met, complete strangers. So these are very again, I'm not saying all is bad is worse, or who's what. And people ask me so much what shaman I can recommend. I'm like, I cannot recommend anyone at this point. And also me personally, when I went on this path, I was never looking for it. It came to me. I see too many people forcefully try to look for it. Like this kid I told you about that in my case, who really took on a demonic possession from an ayahuasca ceremony gone wrong. He was desperately looking for an ayahuasca center on internet until he found it, right? So I never looked for it, even when I work with mushrooms, DMT, and then ayahuasca. It just came to me in certain junctions. It was just presented to me and answered the call, so to speak. Again, going back to the hero's journey, right? But I was not desperately looking for it. And that's another danger. If you're desperately looking for something, it's already a bit of a red flag.
And you'll find it too. But the thing is, what you receive, you may not want to actually experience, even though everything for the soul's progression. But if you ask, you will receive generally. And that's really hear your perspective from somebody that's been there in the 90s, and now there's a phase where you'll probably even see CEOs of multi-million-dollar companies going down and having a ceremony as well now, because there isn't a layer of it being gentrified. But that's a good and a bad thing. More people are aware of it, which could lead to more of a deeper work. But knowing the elements that are at play as well is always very important. And also too, you mentioned beautifully, like I've heard this from other people I've spoken to, but sometimes in certain cultures, they wouldn't actually allow you to drink if you were the one being healed. You would drink other things, and someone would actually drink for you, and he would go through the process of purging.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But it goes.
It's very true.
Yeah, because there were roles that people would have in communities, and it's not like a hierarchical sense. From my understanding or understanding, it'd be more of a heteroarchy. It's like, okay, this is your role. You're the medicine person. This is your lineage because you come from this bloodline. This is your gift to share. Whereas you might be the teacher, the next person may be the cook, whatever it was. Everyone had the roles to play in the community. So now it's more the sense of, I've done ayahuasca, and again, me externalizing, because there's layers of this that I do myself as well in different things. But it's like, I've done ayahuasca a certain amount of times, come to me. But again, without the full knowledge of, hold on, there's the dark part. I believe, the teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda, I've only read a few of the books, but the first one actually does show that it is sorcery at a level. And sorcery and magic are neither good nor bad exclusively, but it is just telling you what it is. So thank you for that. And I also want to say really quickly too, thank you for being someone that's sincere. You mentioned before that the aspect of activation or being, whatever it is, you're very sincere in the sense of all the work that you've done. Somebody that's young, young into this, I really do see the work that you've done, and I really admire that. But you're not somebody that's gone off into the clouds and saying, does share the fact that there is more work to be done, and that you don't feel like you're personally there yet, even though for those like myself, see you and be like, wow, that's where, we can project ourselves. And also being vulnerable and sharing some of the darker elements that you've gone through, because personally, I'm someone generally very optimistic by nature, but I have gone through phases of the last few years where there's been a lot of dark thoughts and dark times and suicidal things coming up. Even though me just reflecting and being like, this is not something that's ever been there in the past, but here it is now. So where is this coming from? And then again, led me to people like yourself to start to question this. So just out of respect for time, Bernhard, we've got now another 10 minutes. I'd really like to spend this last 10 minutes talking about some of the projects that you have coming up. I know that you're looking to do a cruise and tour around Europe, I believe. I believe it's in Croatia. Mm-hmm. That's the one. I want to be there, so I want to do everything I can to get my money right so I can go check out whether it's next year or the year after. But what are some things you're putting together at the moment with your platform, Piercing the Veil of Reality, and some of the other teachings that you have out on different platforms?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, my website for your listeners is veilofreality.com. So there's a lot of free content on there, like over 40 articles, a lot of interviews, talks. Our interview will be on there eventually, lectures. I've produced a few films based on my writings, also about the UFO alien phenomenon, the abduction phenomena, going really deep into that. I produced a film, which, when was it? 9 years ago, a film called Love, Reality, and Time of Transition. Well, produce a film is like a YouTube style film, right? But we actually made it with my friend based on my work and going deep into what is true love and talking about the New Age deception, all of that. And we actually got a little award for that unexpectedly. So that's available there as well.
Congratulations. Didn't mean to cut you
off. So that's on there. And then I started doing webinars, which I feel is just very helpful for a lot of people because my audience is all over the world. So host for live webinars, like the one I have, the hero's journey and the process of embodiment. That's a shorter one that's available to purchase on my website. I recently did a very intense, long webinar just a week ago called Occult Forces of Hyperdimensions and the attachments, interferences, and discernment, protection, healing, and all of that. And it's a 7-hour, 45-minute webinar in 2 parts. And that's, I go deep into all this topic of occult interferences, the topic of all topics, as Don Juan talked about, and what we're dealing with from the hyperdimensional perspective, and give a lot of practical advice based on my own experiences, based on work with people and with my clients. Right. And so that's available on my website as well. So I'm focusing more and more on that. And I'm in the process of actually creating a membership section because I want to get away also from social media. Facebook is just getting too AI infected, and the issues, to create community, because I want to have also, there will be obviously membership content, but also a forum, like old school message board in a sense, with different topic sub forums where people can engage and in a private, safe container and talk about these topics, share their experiences, discuss the work I share, my work, or other topics relating to it. Right, so it'll be great, and I'll be offering like monthly webinars, Q&As, within that. So that's I'm in the process of creating. My partner Laura and I, we're also planning on doing a podcast together, starting next year, and doing workshops together. She's an amazing writer in her own regard. And the next retreat lined up is that cruise you mentioned. It's called the Piercing the Veil of Reality cruise, and it's actually, I didn't organize it, but that organization, Heaven to Earth, approached me and asked me to be a featured speaker at that cruise. And it's basically they rent a private yacht, amazing ship that holds a maximum of 30 people, nice accommodations, great food, and cruising around the Mediterranean off the coast of Croatia, the Adriatic Sea, which is called the jewel of the Mediterranean. It's beautiful there. And I'll be giving daily lectures and talks, and we just also get together, have quality time, intimate time together, discuss things together. Laura, she'll also be teaching yoga and meditation there, and there will be body work even available. Like a friend of mine comes from the Esalen Institute providing amazing body work. So it's a whole round experience, and we're going to check out amazing locations around the coast. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really honored to have been invited too, because past guests actually included Graham Hancock or Nassim Hiram. They were featured at these cruises. So there's more. People can find out about it on my website, and there's a link to Heaven to Earth, and that will be September 7th to the 14th next year. Right. So maximum. So that's the main thing. I might do some workshops before that. I'm planning some retreats, but I'm not sure if I'm going to get everything done before that cruise. We'll see, because I'm focused really now on the membership and also other webinars I want to focus on. And and just again, I feel it's this what I've noticed throughout my work, because I also offer holistic coaching sessions, working with people one-on-one on Skype or via Zoom, and with people from all over the world. And one of the things I hear most people complain about, understandably, so that they are alone, especially when they get into these topics. Everybody's spread out in the world. That's why everybody's on Facebook, right? But it's kind of like diluted as well. So I want to just create more community, and I don't want to form any organization group. I don't claim to be any leader, whatever.
You want to be a god? We can
I don't have no cult aspirations, no guru thing, none of that. Right, I just want to bring people together. That's also the reason with the cruise, to bring people together. That's the beauty of it, and also with the online community, and then maybe with that community, there can be events also happening in the future in real life, and just network and community, right? So that's the main intention, especially in this day and age, because I feel it's important that we connect also beyond the screen. That's a good starting point. It's great. But it has its disadvantages, as I'm sure you're aware of. Like it's a paradox again. Like it connects us to more people over the world, but it keeps us also more isolated by staring at our phones and screens. So that's it. I'm also, I don't know what the future holds, so I'm not concerned with any predictions. Right? I'm not worried about the future at all. I mean, people sometimes project all kinds of things in me because I dive more into the darker, disturbing aspects of reality with occult forces and all of that. But for me, that's just reality. That's just part of life. And I feel, we need to become aware of to navigate, right? So, and at the same time, as you said, as I mentioned before, I'm going through my own process. So my work also reflects where I'm at, my process. So who knows what will happen in the future and where I'll be led to. It's hard for me to make long range goals. I have intentions, certainly, but I'm also more tuned into guidance, divine guidance, right? To surrender to that and what may come, and not get into willful doing or let my ego drive it and all of that, right? So just more engaging in the flow of the Tao, and let's see what happens, right?
Thank you so much for that, and really looking forward to learning more and more from you, both from your content that you have on Veil of Reality, Veil of Reality, or Piercing the Veil.
I call my site Piercing the Veil of Reality, but the web address itself is veilofreality.com.
Thank you for that. And in terms of the webinar that you just released, I'm actually very, very interested because there's a few things that happened recently, literally within the last week, that I think will be very resonant with this. But more so than that, You did mention you don't want to be a cult leader. If you do decide to do anything in the Mediterranean, let me know. I'm open to be like, as long as I'm near the beach in the Mediterranean, as long as I don't hurt anyone, I'm good. But all joking aside, for somebody that has felt at times quote unquote alone, even though I know that I'm not, you have been somebody that's really helped a lot and spoken on things. As you mentioned, you say that some people may say the dark side, but it is the other end of the coin. And thank you for that. Sincerely, thank you so much for that. You've really helped people like myself understand what I'm experiencing, especially when I worked with certain plants and it was like, well, everyone's telling me it should be like this, but I'm feeling this and I saw that. What's going on? And for anybody that's new to your work, I would recommend just watching your YouTube channel, watching some of the panels and the webinars you've been involved with. The hero's journey that I purchased has been very insightful. And my whole tagline actually with my channel, my platform is Journey with Josefa, this process we go through together, even though it's unique. But it's like life's an adventure, it's nothing. And the whole journey of the hero's process is what we chose to do, right?
Exactly.
There are parts of the process where we don't adhere to the core. And actually, it wasn't until I followed your webinar that you realize that's actually part of the process. At certain times, you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to do it. And then it's like, well, you have to do it now. Or you decide to take that step anyway. So just to bring it back in, thank you for that. If there's any way that I can assist you moving forward too, I am open to that. What you're doing in terms of building your platforms, your forums, et cetera, that is something that I'm having some experience out. So I'll speak to you that offline about in future. Do. But to anybody that does come through this recording through my platforms, my channels, please do yourself a favor, check this man out. If you can go to any of his events, any of his talks, he was just recently at the Regeneration event. Please do so. Do yourself a favor and support him in any which way you can. Even if he does set up a cult in the Mediterranean, let's go for that. All right, Bernhard. Was there anything else you'd like to say before I stop the recording?
No, excellent. It was great. Thanks so much, Josefa. Excellent.
All right.